Hello, welcome to Psyched Minds. If you have not subscribed yet to the channel, do subscribe, like and share with like-minded people. We are currently reading It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wallen, How Inherited Family Trauma Shapes Who We Are and How to End the Cycle. Chapter 11, The Core Language of Separation. There is no influence so powerful as that of the mother. Sarah Josepha Hale, The Ladies' Magazine and Literary Gazette, 1829. Not all core language stems from previous generations. There is a particular quality of core language that reflects the overwhelming experience of children who have been separated from their mothers. This type of separation is one of life's most pervasive and frequently overlooked traumas. When we have experienced a significant break in the bond with our mother, our words can reflect an intense longing, anxiety, and frustration that remains unseen and unhealed. In previous chapters, we described how life is passed to us from our parents, essentially laying a blueprint for how we make sense of our lives. This blueprint begins in the womb and takes shape even before we are born. During this time, our mother is our whole world, and once we are born, her touch, her gaze, and her smell is our contact with life itself. While we are too small to make sense of life on our own, our mother reflects our experiences back to us in doses we can ingest and assimilate. In an ideal world, when we cry, her face shows concern. When we laugh, she beams with delight, mirroring our every expression. When our mother is in tune with us, she infuses us with a sense of safety, worth, and belonging through the tenderness of her touch, the warmth of her skin, the constancy of her attention, and even the sweetness of her smile. She fills us up with all her good stuff, and in response, we develop a reservoir of good feeling inside. In our earliest years, we need to acquire enough good stuff in our reservoir to trust that the good feeling will remain inside us even when we temporarily lose our way. When we have enough in our reservoir, we are able to trust that life will turn out okay, even if there are interruptions that knock us off track. When we get little or none of the good stuff from our mother, it can be hard to trust life at all. On many levels, the images we hold of mother and life are interrelated. Ideally, a mother nurtures us and makes sure that we are safe. She comforts us and gives us what we need to survive when we are too small to give it to ourselves. When we are cared for in this way, we begin to trust the feeling that we are safe and that life will provide us with what we need. After repeated experiences of getting enough of what we need from our mother, we learn that we can also give ourselves what we need. In a sense, we feel that we are enough to give ourselves enough. Life in collusion then seems to bring us what we need. When the connection with our mother flows freely, good health, money, success, and love can often seem to flow our way. When the early bond with our mother is interrupted, however, a dark cloud of fear, scarcity, and distrust can become our default. Whether this break in the bond is permanent, as with an adoption, or whether it's a temporary break that did not get fully restored, the gap between mother and child can become a breeding ground for many of life's struggle. When this bond remains interrupted, we seem to lose our lifeline. It's as though we break into pieces and need our mother to put us back together. When the break is only temporary, it is important that our mother stays stable, present, and welcoming during our return from separation. The experience of losing her can be so devastating that we can be hesitant or resistant to reconnect with her. If she is unable to tolerate our hesitation, or if she interprets our reticence as a rejection, she might react by defending or distancing, thus leaving the bond between us bruised and broken. She might never understand why she feels disconnected from us and dwell in feelings of self doubt, disappointment, and insecurity in her ability to mother us Or worse, irritability and anger towards us. A rift that doesn't heal can shake the foundation of our future relationships. An essential feature of these early experiences is that they are not retrievable in our memory banks. During gestation, infancy, and early childhood, our brain is not equipped to put our experiences into story form so that they can be made into memories. Without the memories, our unmet longings can play out unconsciously as urges, cravings, and yearnings that we seek to satisfy through our next job, our next holiday, our next glass of wine, and even our next partner. In a similar vein, the fear and anxiety of an early separation can distort our reality, making our difficult and uncomfortable situations feel catastrophic and life threatening. Falling in love can unleash intense emotions as it naturally transports us back in time to the early experiences with our mother. We tend to have similar feelings towards our partner as we felt towards our mother. We meet someone special and tell ourselves, finally, I have found someone who will take good care of me, someone who will understand all my desires and give me everything I need. Yet, these feelings are only the illusion of a child who longs to re experience the closeness he or she felt or wanted to feel with the mother. Many of us unknowingly expect our partner to fulfill the needs that could not be fulfilled by our mother. This misdirected expectations is a prescription for failure and disappointment. If our partner begins to act like a parent and attempts to satisfy our unmet needs, romance can fly out the window. If our partner does not satisfy our unmet need, we can feel betrayed or neglected. An early separation from our mother can undermine our stability in a romantic relationship. Unconsciously, we might fear that our closeness will vanish or be stripped away. In response, we either cling to our partner, as we may have clung to our mother, or we push our partner away in anticipation that intimacy will be lost. We often express both behaviors in the same relationship, and our partner can feel as though he or she is trapped on an emotional roller coaster ride that never ends. Types of separation. Although the vast majority of women approach motherhood with the best of intentions, situations beyond a mother's control can lead to unavoidable early separations from her child. Some of these separations are physical in nature. In addition to adoption, events that involve an extended period of separation, such as birth complications, hospitalizations, and illnesses, work or long trips away from home, can all threaten the developing bond. Emotional disconnections can function similarly. When the mother is physically available, but her focus and attention are sporadic, the child does not feel safe and secure. As children, we need our mother's emotional and energetic presence as much as we need her physical presence. When our mother experiences a traumatic event such as the loss of health, a pregnancy, a child, a parent, a partner, or a home, her attention can be pulled away from us. We in turn experience the trauma of losing her. Disconnections between mother and child can also occur in the womb. High level of fear, stress, anxiety, depression, a stressful relationship with a partner, the death of a loved one, a negative attitude around being pregnant, a previous loss in utero can all interrupt a mother's attunement with her developing baby inside. If we ourselves have experienced lapses in our mother's early care or attention, or difficulties during pregnancy or birth, all is not lost. Fortunately, the potential to repair the bond is not restricted to childhood. Healing can happen at any time in our lives. Identifying our core language can be the first step. The core language of separation. These early separations, like other kinds of trauma we have explored in this book, create an environment in which core language can flourish. When listening for an interrupted bond, we often hear words of longing for connection as well as words of rage, judgment, criticism, or cynicism. Examples of core sentences from an early separation: I'll be left, I'll be abandoned, I'll be rejected, I'll be all alone, I'll have nobody, I'll be helpless, I lose control, I don't matter, they don't want me, I'm not enough. I'm too much. They will leave me. They will hurt me. They will betray me. I'll be annihilated. I'll be destroyed. I won't exist. It's hopeless. Core sentences like these can also come from a prior generation in the family history and not necessarily from an interruption in the bond with the mother. We can be born into the feeling and never know where it originates. A common theme that characterizes an early separation is a strong rejection of our mother combined with the feeling of blame that she couldn't attend to our needs. This is not always the case, however. We can feel a great love for our mother, but because the bond never fully developed, feel that she was weak and fragile, and that we needed to take care of her. In our need to feel bonded with her, the direction of tending can go in reverse. Unknowingly, we can attempt to provide our mother with the very nurturance we desperately need ourselves. In people with an interrupted bond, it is common to hear core complaints and core descriptors like the ones we discussed in chapter 7. To refresh your memory, mom was cold and distant. She never helped me. I didn't trust her at all. My mother was too busy for me. She never had any time for me. My mom and I are really close. She's like my little sister that I take care of. I don't ever want to be a burden to my mom. My mother was distant, emotionally unavailable, and critical. She would always push me away. She doesn't really care about me. We really don't have a relationship. I felt much closer to my grandmother. She was the one who mothered me. My mother is completely self centered. It's all about her. She never showed me any love. She can be very calculating and manipulative. I didn't feel safe with her. I was scared of her. I never knew what was going to happen next. I'm not close with her. She's not maternal, not like a mother. I've never wanted children. I've never had that maternal feeling inside me. Vanda's aloneness. Vanda was 62 and depressed, a veteran of 3 broken marriages, an alcohol addiction, and many nights of aloneness. Vanda had rarely experienced peace in her life. Her core descriptors about her mother said it all. Vanda's core descriptor: my mother was cold, aloof, and distant. Let's take a look at the event that spawned this type of core language. Before Vanda was born, her mother Evelyn suffered a horrific tragedy. While nursing her newborn baby girl, Evelyn accidentally fell asleep, rolled over, and suffocated the infant. She awoke to find Gail, the older sister Vanda would never know, dead in her arms. In her inconsolable grief, she and her husband made love and conceived Vanda. The new pregnancy was the answer to their prayers. It allowed them to focus forward and forget the past. But a past like that can never be forgotten. The terrible death of Gail and the ensuing guilt would seep into every stream of Evelyn's motherhood. It affected how she would bond with her next child, limiting how consistent and available her love would be. Vanda believed that her mother's distance had been directed towards her personally. Any little girl in her situation would feel that way. Vanda remembered being held as a young child. She could feel her mother's distance and reacted by protecting herself. She felt that her mother must not love her and so armored herself against her. Perhaps Evelyn felt that she was a bad mother who didn't deserve to have another child. Perhaps she felt that she didn't deserve to be given a second chance after what had happened to Gail. Maybe she felt that Vanda, the next child, would die too, a pain she wouldn't be able to tolerate, so she unconsciously distanced herself from her. Perhaps Vanda perceived this distance even in her mother's womb. Maybe Evelyn felt that if she got too close to Vanda and took her to her breast, she could harm her as well. Whatever thoughts and emotions Evelyn had, the trauma of Gail's death had the effect of separating Evelyn from Vanda. It took 60 years for Vanda to make the link that her mother's aloofness was connected to the death of Gail and wasn't personal. She had spent her lifetime blaming and hating her mother for not giving her enough love. When she finally understood the magnitude of her mother's pain, Vanda stood up in the middle of her session and grabbed her purse. I have to go home, she said. There's not much time. My mother is 85 and I need to tell her that I love her. The anxiety of early separations. Jennifer was 2 years old the night the men came to the door. She heard her mother gasp and then watched as her mother collapsed to the floor, sobbing. The men announced that her father had been killed in a drilling rig explosion. Her mother had just become a widow at the age of 26. That was the first night Jennifer's mother did not tuck her into bed with a kiss on her forehead as she drifted into sleep. After that night, things were never the same. Jennifer and her 4-year older brother were taken to their aunts for a few weeks as their mother was paralyzed by the shock. During this time, she would come and visit the children. Jennifer would rush to the door to see her mother, but it was as if a stranger had taken her mother's place. The woman who bent to hug her and a red and swollen face that Jennifer hardly recognized. It scared her. When her mother's arms tightened around her body, Jennifer froze. She wanted to tell her mom how scared she was, but at 2 years old, she was already learning that her mother was different. Mom seemed fragile and had little to give. It would be years before Jennifer would uncover these memories. Jennifer was 26 the time she experienced a panic attack. She was riding the subway home after giving a successful presentation to the management team at work. Suddenly, her vision began to blur. It was as if she were looking out from behind water. Her ears seemed to plug and she began to feel dizzy and afraid. The sensations were so foreign to her that she thought that she was having a stroke. She found herself frozen with a paralysis and that left her helpless and unable to call out for help. The next attack came before her presentation the following week. The one after that occurred while she was shopping. By the end of that month, the panic attacks were a daily occurrence. If Jennifer had been able to hear her own core language, she would have uncovered sentences like these. I won't get through this. I've lost everything. I'm all alone. I will fail. They will reject me. They won't want me anymore. When she got in touch with these fears, she was halfway home. Jennifer began to remember an earlier time in her life when she felt this hopeless and paralyzed. Although she was close with her mom, Jennifer described her as fragile, alone, needy, sweet, and loving. As the words came out, Jennifer was already beginning to get in touch with how helpless she felt as a little girl trying to ease her mother's great grief. The impossible task of a little girl attempting to console her mother left Jennifer feeling alone, unsafe, and afraid of failing. Connecting her panic attacks to her childhood allowed Jennifer to target the source of her anxiety. Whenever the panicky feelings would arise, Jennifer was able to diffuse them by reminding herself that these were merely the feelings of a frightened little girl. Once she could identify those feelings inside her, she was able to slow the escalation of anxiety. Jennifer learned how to lengthen and deepen her breath while keeping her focus and attention on the anxious sensations in her chest. She also learned to speak the words that would have soothed her as a little girl. She would breathe and tell herself, I'm here for you, and I'll take care of you. You never have to be alone in these feelings again. You can trust me to keep you safe. The more Jennifer practiced, the more she trusted her ability to take care of herself. Trichotillomania, separated at the root. For 16 years, Kelly pulled her hair from her scalp, eyebrows, and eyelashes. She wore fake lashes painted on eyebrows and wore her hair tightly pulled back to conceal the bald patches underneath. Hair pulling, or trichotillomania, was a nightly ritual. Each evening around 9 p.m., she would sit alone in her room, overwhelmed with the feelings of anxiety that would overtake her body. Her hands, needing to be doing something, wouldn't find peace until she yanked out massive amounts of hair. It's like a release, she said. It relaxes me. When Kelly was 13, her best girlfriend, Michelle, rejected her. Kelly never understood what she had done that caused Michelle to suddenly distance herself from her, but the feeling of loss were unbearable. She began pulling her hair soon after that. There must be something wrong with me, she thought. I must not be enough to make her want to stay with me. These sentences, as you will soon see, flashed like direction signs along the highways of her core language landscape. Living just below the surface of consciousness, waiting to be discovered, these sentences would direct Kelly to an even earlier and more significant event, a break in the bond with her mother. When Kelly was a year and a half, she underwent intestinal surgery and had to be separated from her mother for 10 days. Each evening, as hospital visiting hours would end approximately 9 p.m., Kelly's mother would leave her to go home to take care of Kelly's newborn sister and older brother. One can only imagine the feelings of anxiety that Kelly must have experienced when her mother would leave her alone in the hospital room. Those feelings unconsciously found their way to the surface in Kelly's trichotillomania. Each night at approximately 9 p.m., they would stir in Kelly's body until she found a substitute way to manage them by literally pulling her hair out. Kelly's worst fear, as expressed in her core sentence, led her back to the root of the trauma. The worst thing that could ever happen to me is that I would be all alone. I would be left. I would go out of my mind. Kelly's core sentence, I'll be all alone, I'll be left, I'll go out of my mind. When Kelly was 13, she re experienced these feelings. Michelle and Kelly had been inseparable, then suddenly Michelle left Kelly and befriended girls from the in crowd. At that point, all the girls turned against Kelly. Kelly felt left, rejected, and ignored. That experience, when looked at with a larger scope, can be viewed as a missed opportunity for Kelly to have been pointed in the direction of greater healing of the deeper, more significant trauma of being left in the hospital by her mother. Not many of us, however, when faced with our difficulties, can use the difficulties as direction signs. Instead, we focus on alleviating the suffering and rarely travel to the source. When we recognize the wisdom of our core language, the symptoms of our suffering can become our greatest ally. The metaphor of Kelly's hair pulling. Kelly's core language showed her how deeply afraid she was of being left alone. In fact, her hair pulling, the non-verbal expression of her core language, began right after Michelle left. While Kelly's hair pulling led her to uncover her original trauma, it is also a metaphor for two things that belonged together that had been separated from each other. Kelly separated her hair from the follicle that held it. The image is similar to that of a baby being separated from the mother who holds her. Idiosyncratic behavior often mimic what cannot be consciously observed or examined. When we stop and explore our symptoms, a deeper truth can be revealed to us. Symptoms often function as signposts, pointing us in the direction of what we need to heal or resolve. When Kelly embraced her hair pulling in this way, she traveled to the source of her suffering and freed herself from a lifetime of anxiety. Kelly's resolution. Kelly located the uncomfortable sensation of being left all alone in her belly. She placed her hand over the anxious area and allowed her breath to fill her belly as she felt rising and falling of breath beneath her hands. She envisioned holding and rocking the infant part of herself that still felt frightened and all alone. As the movement began to calm her, she told herself, I will never leave you when you are feeling alone and afraid. Instead, I will place my hand here and breathe with you until you feel calm again. After one session, Kelly stopped pulling out her hair. Separation, the origin of inner conflict. Sometimes the freedom we seek eludes us. Unable to feel at ease inside our bodies, we search for relief in the next glass of wine, the next purchase, the next text, or phone call, phone call, the next sexual partner. Relief rarely comes when the source of our longing is our mother's care. For those of us who have been cut off from the light of our mother's love, our world can be an endless search for comfort. Myrna was 2 when her mother accompanied her father on a business trip to Saudi Arabia and left Myrna in the care of a babysitter for 3 weeks. During the first week, Marna clung to the sweater her mother wore on cold nights as she rocked her to sleep. Comforted by the familiar feel and smell, Marna would curl herself around it and rock herself to sleep. By the second week, Marna refused to take the sweater when the babysitter offered it. Instead, she turned away, crying, and sucked her thumb to fall asleep. After 3 weeks away, her mother excitedly hurried through the door to hold her daughter. She was expecting Myrna to run into her arms as she always had before. This time it was different. Myrna barely looked up from her dolls. Startled and confused, Myrna's mother could not help but notice the sensations of her own body tightening with feelings of rejection. Over the coming days, Myrna's mother would rationalize the experience, telling herself that Myrna was becoming a very independent child. Unaware of the importance of restoring their delicate bond, Myrna's mother lost sight of her little girl's vulnerability and held herself a little distant. The distance continued between them, deepening Myrna's feeling of aloneness. This distance would spill into Myrna's life experiences, tainting her ability to feel safe and secure in future relationships. Feelings of abandonment and frustration were expressed in her core language. Don't leave me. They will never come back. I'll be all alone. I'm not wanted. They don't get who I am. I'm not seen or understood. For Myrna, falling in love was a minefield of unpredictability. The vulnerability of needing another person was so terrifying that each time she took another step into her desire, she was met by a deeper level of her fear. Unable to link this conflict to her childhood, she found fault with every man who attempted to love her, often leaving them before they could leave her. By the time she was 30, Marna had talked herself out of the 3 potential marriages. Marna's inner conflict played out in her career as well. Each time she accepted a new position, she filled with doubt, fearing inevitable disaster. Something would go terribly wrong. They wouldn't like her, she wouldn't be enough. They would distance themselves from her, she wouldn't trust them. They would betray her. These were the same unspoken feelings Marna felt with a partner, the same feelings she had never resolved with her mother. How many of us struggle with conflicts similar to Marna's and haven't been able to identify the source? The importance of our early bond with our mother cannot be overstated. She is our first relationship as we enter the world. She is our first love. Our connection or lack of connection with her forms an essential blueprint for our lives. Understanding what happened when we were small can expose one of the hidden mysteries as to why we suffer so much in our relationship. Instructions to the flow of life. Yeah. Interruptions to the flow of life. Our earliest image of who we are and how life will unfold for us begins in the womb. During pregnancy, our mother's emotions permeate our world, influencing whether our basic nature is calm or troubled, receptive or defiant, resilient or inflexible. Whether the child's mind evolves into something essentially hard, angular, and dangerous, or soft, flowing, and open depends largely on whether the mother's thoughts and emotions are positive and reinforcing or negative and act with ambivalence, explains Thomas Verney. This absolutely does not mean that occasional doubts and uncertainty will damage your child. Such feelings are natural and harmless. What I'm talking about is a clear cut, continual pattern of behavior. When our early experiences with our mother is disrupted by a significant break in the bond, shards of pain and emptiness can shred our well being and disconnect us from the fundamental flow of life. Where the mother child or caregiver child relationship remains severed, empty, or fraught with indifference, a stream of negative feelings can lock the child in a pattern of frustration and self doubt. In extreme cases, when the negative images are continuous and unrelenting, frustration, rage, numbness, and insensitivity to others can emerge. This profile is commonly associated with sociopathic and psychopathic behavior. In their book, High Risk Children Without a Conscience, Dr. Ken Magid and Carol McKelvey state, we all have some degree of rage, but the rage of psychopaths is that born of unfulfilled needs as infants. Maggot and McKelvey go on to describe how the infant experiences incomprehensible pain as a result of an abandonment or early break in the bond. Psychopaths and sociopaths sit at the far end of a wide spectrum where severe interruptions to the bond have been observed. These extreme cases reflect just how crucial a mother or early caregiver's role is in shaping the child's developing compassion, empathy, and respect for self, others, and all life. The majority of us who have experienced a break in the bond with our mother, however, got enough of what we needed, even with the deficits. It would be unrealistic to expect a mother to be perfectly attuned to her child 100% of the time. Disruptions in attunement are bound to happen. When they do, the repair process can be positive growth experience, giving both mother and child an opportunity to learn how to handle brief moments of distress and then reach out for each other to reconnect again. What is most important is that the repair is made. Repeatedly repairing a relationship actually builds a sense of trust and helps to create a secure attachment between mother and child. Even when our connection to our mother is relatively intact, we may still find ourselves grappling with feelings we don't understand. We might struggle with fears of being left, rejected, or abandoned, or feeling of being exposed, humiliated, or shamed. However, when these feelings can be seen in the context of our early experiences with our mother, likely from a time we don't remember, we can become more aware of what was missing and more able to support what we need in order to heal. And that brings us to the end of chapter 11. And as I said in the stream, I would definitely want you guys to just go and hug your mother at this point. And well, if you have realized if there was an interruption to the flow of life or a break in the early bond with your mother, then if you have recognized it, if you have recognized the source, then well, I don't know if it works, but yeah, do try to reconcile, do try to resolve, and follow these steps that are given in the book. Maybe it will help, maybe it won't, but yeah, it will definitely give you a kickstart, right? So, yeah, that would be my recommendations to just go and hug your mother. Yeah. So, yeah, if there are any comments, any kind of feedback, anything at all, do reach out to me in the comment section of the video you're viewing or in the community section of YouTube channel. Bye bye for now. Take care. Keep reading. Bye.